Welcome back to HALC TV. We have a fun guest today, Tom Ellis. A lot of you have heard him on our podcast before, have followed him when we've appeared with him at Delphi Economic Forum. He obviously was at one of our conferences, the chief media co-sponsor. You know him as the managing editor of Kathimerini's English edition. What a lot of you don't know, and since we're learning a lot about people during the Corona crisis, is Tom has a little bit of an infatuation with Ernest Hemingway. So let's take a quick look at that. And you're going to see his look during the Corona crisis. I don't know, are we getting it on? And I hope you guys are able to see it, because I'm not. But Dos Equis has caught Tom's new look and is trying to get Tom in as the new most interesting man in the world. But I've known him for a long time, and he's definitely more interesting than the guy at Dos Equis. Tom, welcome back to the HALC universe.
Thank you for having me. I'm, what an introduction. But anyway, all right. How are you, Andy?
Tom, I think we got some good news stories here. We're over on our end. The last month and a half has been full of bad news. And we look over across the Atlantic and all the way over to Greece with quite a bit of pride as Greek Americans, because Greece has led and has done such a great job. But take us to the beginning. I want to make one kind of preface remark. About a month ago, we had Roderick Beaton on, and he did this wonderful work on modern Greek history. And he says Greece has been a pioneer. That's the story of Greece. And kind of it looks again that Greece may be the pioneer or one of the pioneers in this Corona crisis. So take it to the beginning of the crisis, and how did Greece avoid Italy's fate?
Look, I think things are kind of simple. The government, the prime minister and the government did mostly the right thing. They followed the advice of scientists. They called on people to be responsible. They emphasized the danger of the virus, something unknown. So we had to, in a way, try to work on uncharted territory. The opposition, for most part, was helpful. I mean, especially on the basics. All parties, not only the main opposition, they seemed to be serious and said, whatever has to happen, and everybody would go along. Even the church, which in the case of Greece, as you know, for all of us, is a major institution. At the beginning, there was, a little bit of a debate, especially in our case with Orthodox Easter coming up. It wasn't an easy thing to do, but the prime minister asked the leadership of the church to be cooperative, and I would say they were. There was some tension at the beginning because, again, for them, Easter, the Holy Week, are major developments. It's a major period for Orthodoxy. So to ask people not to go to churches during that period, it's huge. But even the church acted the way they should. So the whole country, from the government, the opposition, business leaders, the labor force, everybody was doing the right thing. And in a way, I'm not happy to say it, but in a way I am. It's a surprise that the Greeks acted the way we did. So there wasn't any second guessing. There wasn't any rhetoric as we have seen in other countries. I would dare say in the US or even in the UK, where you had conflicting messages. In this case, we followed what the scientists said. And then we had this, probably, I don't know if you know him or you've heard of him, Dr. Chodras, who is, let's say, our Dr. Fauci. And he seemed to, on a PR basis, and the guy's not a public relations guru or something, but he came out so human, so right, so natural that everybody seemed to follow whatever he said. So it wasn't that much the government which creates some ideological tension or whatever. It was a scientist, the right person at the right time, talking to the simple person on the street, the believer who had to make a big decision not to go to church, to kids who had to stay home during, not go to school, not see friends. So all these issues that are there for everybody, for all the countries. In our case, everybody has an idea about Greece being, a country where we tend to do whatever we want, or we don't follow rules. In this case, the big surprise was that most things, I wouldn't, say everything went 100% right, but most things happened the way that should happen. And at the end of the day, after 2 months, we are today and yesterday, no deaths, very few cases. It's, we flattened the curve, which of course shouldn't make us too happy, because sometimes we might go overboard, especially with summer coming up and whatever. But I think, to summarize, everybody did their share, and strangely enough, everybody followed the rules and the decisions of the people who were supposed to give them, and in this case, they were the scientists.
I think you brought up a great contrast, and for those of you who don't know, Tom he was Kathimerini's correspondent here in the United States for years. He knows the United States back and forth and still follows it, and is one of Greece's top commentators on the U.S. But the contrast you gave on information going out to the public. Chodras is someone that even people here were following. You're right. He had this Fauci-like aura around him. But it seems to me that the big difference was the backup he got from the top. Prime Minister Mitsotakis echoed Chodras, was a calming influence. Minister Kikilias, it doesn't seem the opposition or, some rogue element in the press was contradicting him. Is that it? Was everybody taking the lead from Chodras, and the thought leadership and the political leadership really, working in concert?
Yeah, I think, as I said, it was a little surprising in a positive way, but whatever Chodras was saying was what was happening, and from the top to the bottom. And even on the opposition level, the former health minister said that if we were in government, we would have had somebody like Chodras. That's not what everybody said in the opposition. There were also some critical voices, but there were very few. 90+% of the people were following with no criticism what Mr. Chodras said. And the backing by the prime minister was clear. It was one of those cases where you feel, I don't want to make comparisons with very successful countries, but we were an example, to a rare case for Greece, an example to be followed. How a country did the right thing with results. But again, as I said before, we are entering another critical period, especially in the case of Greece, with the weather and tourism, which is a major source of income. If everything goes well, I'm not sure it will, but where people have to, again, be cautious. And to be honest, as we move on, I said all these good things, but now in the last few days, you see, the weather is 80 degrees, 85 degrees, sunny. More people than I guess scientists would like to see are going to the beaches and seem to be too close in many gatherings in squares or whatever. I hope this will be something that we will very quickly deal with. But as I said, the numbers are very positive. Today, yesterday, we had no deaths. So we are on the right trajectory. Just we have to keep doing the right thing.
Tommy, another, kind of another pioneering tool or aspect of Greece's approach here, something that is stunning to me, given how backward Greece is portrayed here in the United States, but we don't have this at all. The work of the digital ministry and describe how Greeks went out, the SMS message and the SMS system, and is that a tool that is going to continue as a stay-at-home order is lifted to somehow manage density and manage traffic of people?
Now we're entering some gray area with the fear that people will know all your moves, so it's a sensitive privacy issue coming up. But Greece, given where we were, has made many huge steps forward in a very little time. And the Ministry of Digital Governors was at the center of that. The minister is a young guy who actually has great thoughts and ideas and was ahead of the curve from the past. He has proven to be right. One more case where the prime minister followed or gave his minister a lot of space to work, and he has delivered. Many things have been automized, including schools, which is a huge issue, as you know, all over the world. But in the case of Greece, a lot of people were in unknown territory. Will we be able, what are we going to do? Will kids be able to continue having their lessons or whatever from home? Well, they have. And the digital world or life has come into Greece in an unexpected, very quick way with results. And all this criticism we had for years and decades, cross-party criticism with different prime ministers, different parties, that the Greek state doesn't work. It's backwards. A lot of reluctance to modernize. In a matter of a couple of months, Greece has become a whole different country and a whole different world. And this, I think, is very difficult to lose. I mentioned before the fact that we should be very prudent with summer and the nice weather coming up. In the case of the digitalization, if that's the right word, of the state and life, I think you cannot go back. As I said, some privacy issues will come up. We've seen that in the States and all over Europe, in modern countries, and we have to deal with them legally and otherwise. But the country is moving into a much faster pace on that level too.
You brought up the idea of compliance, or the fact of the compliance of the Greek people, not much rebelling, certainly not nothing like the protests that we see here in the United States. Is this part of the resilience? We hear a lot about resilient societies. Is this part of the resilience that the Greek people kind of built up during the last crisis? And are there stories that we haven't heard? We've heard this government success, this macro success, stories of people taking care of their neighbors and the rest.
Oh yeah, that, to be honest, I don't want to be nationalistic or whatever the word is, but as we have seen in 2015 and onwards with the flows in the Aegean, with immigrants and refugees, Greeks are hospitable. Even the poor people try to open up their houses their families to offer their help, assistance. So in this case, of course, I mean, people will. I personally know so many cases where you wouldn't be able to go to your parents because of their age, but the neighbor who was, in the apartment next to them would go and bring them drugs or pharmaceuticals or whatever, or food. So we have numerous cases of social, not distancing, but social assistance. Let's say. Um, but we, I mean, there are also cases where, as I see in the U.S., nothing compared to the U.S., where you have people on the streets against what the governor or the government says. No, here you don't. But you start to have, which is normal, I think, the person who has the restaurant or the cafeteria not criticizing, but putting forward the real substance of what the next day should look like and how me, the little restaurant owner, will deal with it if you need social distancing. What do I do? And even here, you have the state respond with common sense, I would say. They understand the issue and the problem, and they try to accommodate the little cafeteria owner, allowing him or her some more space to have more, or outside, let's say, their tables or chairs. I mean, even on that level, which was not, it was forbidden in the past. But now everybody's trying to do the thing that is workable, based on common sense and science. And at the same time, we all realize that the economy has to start again. But it's not done in a like violent or very loud governor, anti-mayor, anti-president way. It's more, I have 20 tables, now I'm allowed 5. We both, you, the government, me, the restaurant owner, realize I have an issue, I have a problem, and I have employees. How do we deal with it? And then the government comes in and says, okay, let's find a way where you'll have some tables outside, and maybe not 20, but from 20 you'll go to 15 instead of 5. So strangely enough, in most cases, everybody seems to be up to the task.
Tom, I lost you for.
Am I?
I got you back.
Okay.
Okay. You mentioned the economy. You mentioned the challenges that the restaurant owners do, tourism, all the rest. We've seen at the very least a little bit of help from Europe, letting Greece access certain funds that it wasn't able to during the economic crisis, suspending, I believe, the requirement for the primary surplus. What does the short term look like? What are the short term challenges look like for Greece? And are our European partners on the track to doing a better job now than they did in 2015, for example?
Look, in the case of the economy, I think, of course, no primary surpluses. I mean, we're in a whole different world. We're going to have huge deficits. Everybody will. So it's they're trying to accommodate ECB and the other governments or the Commission, the European Commission. The issue here is the role of Germany, the largest economy. How accommodating, quote unquote, will Germany be? They're still discussing. I don't want to go into details. The government here has responded by helping employees, helping employers to keep their companies open, subsidies, and the rest. But the big question or challenge for Greece will be tourism. We all know that tourism is more than 20% of GDP. It's huge, and we are in May. So it's, if we were in the winter, one would have maybe had time to plan, maybe hope that things will get better scientifically wise as far as drugs or other things. Here we're entering the season, and it doesn't look good, to be honest. On a practical level, it's difficult. I mean, will people travel? Will they get on the airplane? Will they go to a hotel? Will they? So there are so many questions. And there we're entering at some point a metaphysical world, because the government will do what it has to do. The owners will try, but then it has to do with psychology. It has to do with how people in different countries feel. Unfortunately, I would tend to think that a lot of foreign tourists who would otherwise come to Greece, including Americans, will have second thoughts, provided, of course, there is an airplane that would be able to bring them. Still, they will have second thoughts. So there's no way we will avoid a huge bump. I mean, there will be a deficit there, or much lower income or earnings for the country, or all the business world that is built around tourism. And right now, I think that's the main challenge. Because of the summer, and I'm moving into indirectly or directly, I guess, foreign relations also. In the case, we have our issues with Turkey, and we can talk about them or whatever. But
yeah, actually, I want to go one more on the tourism, and I do want to, because you've written some great
because
stuff.
of the immigrants and the islands. But go ahead. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a related issue. That's why.
Yeah, as there, I see among our viewers is Yannis Tsakalos, and he did a great piece about extending the very concept and broadening the very concept of Greek tourism and business tourism. Today American made an announcement, American Airlines, because last year with much fanfare here in Chicago, we got a direct service from Chicago to Athens, which had not been there. So we had direct Chicago to Athens, direct Newark to Athens, direct Philly to Athens. I know they're all in limbo, but now they're going from the beginning of July to the end of October. So there's kind of it was finishing last year at the beginning of October. Is there some planning for extending tourism, trying to make a year-round effort in trying to mitigate the loss of tourists dollars by broadening the concept of a tourist season?
I'm sure there are. I mean, I don't know the details, and there are no decisions yet. I mean, we're still at the process. The tourism ministry, from the prime minister down, they're trying to see what should be done. Extending the tourist season is, of course, the obvious thing to do. But here, as we have to be honest and objective in our analysis, there's a big debate or question about the possible second wave of the virus. So you plan, but, again, it goes beyond your own abilities. They will try to extend it, and the weather, as you know, in September is perfect. Some would say, including myself, better than August. More calm, and you still have the warmth and the rest. And of course, it will depend not only on Greece, but how different companies, industries act in the US and in Europe, meaning the employees. How will their vacations be formed, if that's the right word? We're used to having July and August as the 2 months where most people from all over the world, from the US to China, would come. Will that still be the case? One, since I'm saying a lot of things which are kind of negative, let me say a few positive ones. The scientists say warmth. In Greece, we have 90 degrees, maybe it's too warm, but in this case, maybe that's good. Helps with the coronavirus. So in that case, I would assume the tourism ministry and the whole planning can take advantage of that and promote the fact that we're a country which is too warm, or in a nice way,
So a lot of outstanding issues. We had a question about what will the protocols be for tourists coming in. Those are not yet. We don't know that. Just so you know, there's a lot of discussion about testing. But there's discussion.
And there's also a pan-European approach. So the Greek government awaits the decisions in Brussels to see how, because the first step will be the intra-Europe travel. How do the countries within the Union or Schengen, or let's say the Union, will agree to have their companies, airlines, hotels, what the standards will be. So I doubt there will be official announcements before there is a more general planning with the Europeans. People are thinking, people are planning, and we do know our pluses and minuses in Greece. But whatever comes out from Greece will definitely be in cooperation with at least the European countries, which to a large extent are a major source of income. So we will have to wait them. And of course, Greece has its own input in these decisions, but we have to have a pan-European approach to, quarantine. Do you keep people 1 day, 2 days? How do you test? Do you test them before they go on the plane? Most likely they will. Do you test them again when they get off? I mean, all these we are still, as you know, I guess in the US too, in the process of trying to see what the right thing is to minimize the cost, but at the same time remain safe.
Tom, you've got to witness geopolitics and the U.S.-Greece bilateral relations at the closest level. You were here and in Washington during a pretty difficult time, especially over the Macedonian issue and the Cyprus issue and on. You wrote a great book. We're still waiting for it in English on the EMEA crisis. But you have written a lot in the last month about Erdogan's opportunism and what Turkey may try or may be looking to try to do during this crisis. And I want to marry that with you alluded to with the weather warming up, maybe us having to go back to the crisis Greece faced at the beginning of March, end of February, with Turkey weaponizing refugees and migrants and trying to overwhelm Greece's borders. Give us your take on this.
Well, Erdogan, we know he has so many issues and goals, whatever. I will start with the immigration refugee issue, which touches on the economy and tourism also. If the weather allows, and most likely will allow, easier access to the islands for people from the other side of the Aegean, that complicates the work of the Greek state much more this year than others, because now we also have the virus dimension, and I don't want to go into a very critical approach, which for some people might be unfair. We see Turkey in a very critical way. But let's say, because some people say, you could also send people with who are not that healthy, say that way. But even if you don't go there, even if it's just the normal flows in the Aegean. Now, how are we going to deal with thousands of people coming in when there might be, and the numbers would suggest there will be, people with a virus among the people, the immigrants or the refugees who are crossing to our islands? How will this impact the islands themselves? Do we have the capacity to deal with that? Not only stop the flows, but once they do come, it's not only an issue of legalities and asking for asylum. It's also a health issue. And then for the tourists from abroad, it becomes, something to be concerned about, possibly. So if we do have more flows, that will not only be a foreign relations and security issue, which I don't want to belittle the issues we have with Turkey all those years, but they were there last year and they were there 2-3 years ago. So we dealt with them, and hopefully we'll deal with them the right way. But in this case, you might have a destructive influence on our industry, even if no one does something on purpose. Even the fact that possibly many of those people are infected, and how do you make sure that everybody's tested? And how do you make sure that the people who are tested don't, come in any contact with people who want to go and enjoy the island? So it's a very complex, complicated development, which is unknown until now. Until now, we had the issues, huge issues with overflights, with, we know of these problems, and Turkey will not stop. Actually, they have increased the overflights.
So since they're not going, I want to pick up on that. We know they're not going to stop. And frankly, the Evros crisis may have been a testing, but since we talked about the government handling the corona crisis so admirably, it looked like the government and the army and the police and the citizen protection ministry did a marvelous job during the Evros crisis, not only in protecting the Greek borders, not letting it devolve into a much more violent situation, but also building quite a bit of diplomatic support, especially from Europe. Give us your take and an evaluation on the government's performance during that crisis and what that means in the future. Does that mean Erdogan is going to be more careful about testing Greece?
If you or I or somebody else could go get into Erdogan's mind, that would be a great, not that the opposition in Turkey, and I take this opportunity to just note that, because sometimes we feel, Erdogan is a bad guy, and we are full of good options in the opposition to Erdogan within Turkey, which is not the case. Most members of the opposition are not the easy neighbor that we would like to have. Now, having said that, with the effort to do what he tried to do in January, February, he did not succeed. The government, as you noted, the police, the army, the National Guard, they all did what they had to do. For me, the major, to be honest, I expected the armed forces to be vigilant and to respond correctly. What I think the major welcome surprise was how diplomatically active we were and how we managed to bring all the heads of the European Parliament, the European Commission, the European Council. Everybody came, saw, understood, publicly and privately supported us. They even sent, right now as we speak, you have Austrian and French and other forces on the border between Greece and Turkey, which, symbolically, but also substantively creates a whole different world. It's not an easy thing to, even for Erdogan, it's not an easy thing to do, to repeat what he did in February. That's why I feel if he decides to challenge Greece again in a similar way, he will most likely be on the islands, which, as I noted before, is also by definition, by the mere fact that it's more difficult to guard, a more complex issue, given also the fact of the health dimension.
Tom, on that, you mentioned, the diplomatic support. You talked about European partners and Frontex, the European Commission, European Parliament. I want to note that you didn't mention the United States. and the United States said some good words. The initial comment that came from the State Department was almost shameful. They urged both parties to refrain they urged restraint from both parties as if Greece was doing something. And that after a lot of outrage, I assume from Athens, from the Greek press, from the Greek American community, they kept upping the statements and they finally got to the right place. But we have a part two. We have the follow-up, Turkey's once again invading Cyprus's exclusive economic zone. The State Department's response is weak. The State Department's response to Turkey's continued violations over the Aegean weak. And today we had the foreign ministers of Greece and Cyprus, Egypt, France, and I think the United Arab Emirates all get together and do a joint communique. And is this a source of frustration right now in Greece, in Athens, both in the political leadership, the thought leadership, the press, that the United States is not being more clear with Turkey?
Well, what we hear from the Americans, and it's not a new thing, and there is some validity to it. So I don't want to be totally critical that we shouldn't lose Turkey. I hear that. Okay, you want Turkey be anchored on the West, with the West, in NATO, whatever. But how far do you go in order to not make them upset? I'm not saying it's good to have Turkey become another Pakistan or Iran or however you want to call it. But I had many discussions with present and former diplomats from the U.S. where I hear the point, and as I said, I'm not this radical kind of anti-whatever. I hear the valid point that you want to keep Turkey inside. Well, try to use your financial, military, political weight to keep them inside. And to be honest, Greece, and this has been recognized, I think, by Washington, Greece has been for years one of those countries that is on track on that. I mean, we are not saying, throw Turkey out. Even with the European-Turkish relations, we are one of those countries who want Turkey to be part of the puzzle. And what do we ask? And even in tourism, wouldn't it be great if we had cruises, between the islands in Turkey and have everybody win? It could be a win-win. Why do you need the overflights? Why do you need the rhetoric about so many different things? Tell Turkey to, stop overflying, and it's a win-win situation. Stop challenging. Stop saying it's a casus belli and you're ready to attack a fellow NATO country with which you are part of the same largest, strongest alliance in the history of the world, and it's going to be a win for you. Now, with Libya, we have this issue where Turkey is going so far as to almost present Crete as not existing. And thankfully, on that level, we heard, since you mentioned how the U.S. reacted and all that, at least they accepted the fact that islands are there. They do have their own waters and they do have their own rights. And you cannot just draw maps and do whatever you want. Since I know the Greek American community well, and to a certain extent I feel I'm part of that, I feel that the U.S. could be more forthcoming on that level, noting, again, as I said, that you don't have to be anti-Turkey to do that. You have to explain to Turkey that it's to its own benefit, cooperate, and it can win so much from a good relationship with Greece than have all these frictions. And to be honest, it might be naive, but I don't get it. What do they win by overflying over this or that island? They make a point, okay, and you have the possibility of an accident. You have the possibility of who would win from that? Greece could pay a price, okay, but we are not a small military power, so I'm sure Turkey will pay a price. Why would you want this when you do have your Syrian front open? Not the perfect result, not a huge success there. Why do you do that? I'm not in Erdogan's mind, so.
Well, and I think the whole point is, and of course, as you mentioned, Greece and Cyprus, Egypt, the UAE, the countries who spoke today probably have even a greater interest in not losing Turkey than the U.S. does. But this appeasement of Turkey creates what we did a program a couple months ago before Corona with Stephen Cook, where he says, if Turkey keeps doing this, it will result in bandwagoning against it. And we saw it. And if the U.S. doesn't tell Turkey, cut it out, we're going to see more of that. But I think this is a conversation we're going to see play out. But everybody should read the joint communique by, again, the foreign ministers of Greece, Cyprus, France, UAE, and Egypt, which unequivocally condemns Turkey's provocations both in the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean. Last question, Tom, and thanks again for all the time you give us. We know the whole world is watching the U.S. not only for the Corona crisis, but because of the elections. And, in 2008, you were still the correspondent here. You conducted a now famous interview with Vice President Biden. Tell us, what people in Greece are looking at and what they're looking for out of this election.
Look, on a first level, I think not only Greece, but most of the world watch the U.S. and are puzzled. I don't know what the right word is. How, the U.S. used to, for better or for worse, used to lead in every crisis, from health, economy, to stability. You had the superpower be at the forefront, create alliances, lead. You could be critical of the way it led. You could be critical of decisions it made, but no one disputed the U.S.'s leadership role. Right now, in one huge crisis, and we see the U.S. almost absent. As far as Greece, most people who follow Greek-American relations know that Joe Biden has been not close. I mean, he knows and has dealt with issues relating to Greece and Cyprus. I mean, he wasn't anti-Turkey. He traveled to Turkey so many times. I think if he's elected, he's somebody who will try to find some middle ground. I mean, let's not think that an American president will be so pro-Greek and so pro-Cypriot that everything will be, 100% the way we want. But right now, we have the Congress, which is voting bills and takes decisions and resolutions with respect to Turkey. And you have a president in the White House who talks about his friendship with Erdogan, who likes the fact that Erdogan is this tough guy in a tough neighborhood, and keeps sometimes, I don't know if the right word is violating, but going around the U.S. laws in order to accommodate Erdogan. So in that sense, an independent-minded Greek or Greek-American who follows these things, and I'm not going into U.S. domestic politics. You can be a Republican, you can be a Democrat. I respect that. But just on the U.S.-Greece relationship or U.S.-Greece-Cyprus relationship, all the indications are that a Biden presidency would be more understanding and accommodating with respect to our issues and our sensitivities. Of course, that remains to be seen because a lot of times a lot of people promise. We remember Jimmy Carter with the embargo, but as things stand, I think the former vice president is somebody who most Greeks going beyond again their ideology, and I respect if somebody's really for Trump, it might be difficult to go to the other side. But on the our issues, you cannot dispute the fact that Joe Biden is more and more understanding, if that's the right word.
Tom, thanks again. We look forward to more good news coming from Greece. Just for those who maybe joined late, the good news is Greece is slowly opening up. The new cases are really being kept at a minimum, and we're not having new deaths in Greece. Hopefully that this can continue. Obviously, one thing that we learned, we are really in this together. And, as tourism opens up, we got to make sure the whole world is kind of clear before somebody brings us into Greece. There was a question about whether Americans will be able to come in August. We answered that before, that the flights are going to be available in August, but too much is unknown. We don't know for sure what the protocols will be. So we'll keep informing our viewers and our readers. Stay safe out there, Tom. I know you got a front page to finish up. Thanks for all your good work with Kathimerini. We look forward to hearing from you again soon.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Take care.